We got some sneak peeks on the balance changes coming in the next update. Some crazy buffs. There's actually a ton of them. We got a Leon nerf, a Daryl buff, a Mortis buff, and a lot more. So let's go over all the balance changes coming in the next update and what that means for each brawl. Let's get into it. Alright, so today's sneak peek on the next update is just going to cover the balance changes coming in the next update. Now, I don't know when I can give you more sneak peeks on the update. I don't know exactly when it's coming, but as soon as I can do more sneak peeks, I will get them out for you as soon as possible. So let's go over all the buffs and nerfs coming in the next update, and it is going to be crazy. There's a lot of changes. The meta is going to be pretty different. Let's start out with the one that we all wanted to come. We all probably thought was coming, and it's going to be the Leon nerf. First of all, his super invisibility time is going to be decreased from 10 seconds to 8 seconds. So that's a definitely significant nerf for him. Also, his main attack damage at close range is also going to be decreased by about 8%. So he's getting a solid nerf here. Though if you're worried, you're one of those people who just spent 30 bucks buying Leon, I wouldn't be too worried because he's not going to be a bad brawler, but he's not going to be the best brawler in the game anymore. He's still going to be top 10 brawler, I think. We'll see if he's going to be a top 5 brawler or not still. I think that invisibility time nerf is definitely going to be significant. It's going to make him get less valuable supers. If you're able to scout him out, he might not be able to get a really solid attack in. And of course, he's going to do a little bit less damage too. So maybe like tanks will be able to counter him a little bit more. I think that might be the big difference there. We'll have to see. Another really big change is coming to Daryl. Daryl's getting a really solid buff. He might have before been a potential trash can, but now it might not matter as much if you are really finesse with Daryl, because he's getting a really solid buff. His star power protection, whenever you roll with Daryl and his super, you get a normal star power protection. It used to be 30% damage reduction. Now it's going to be increased all the way to 40%. So he's going to take 10% less damage every time he rolls now compared to before. So, I mean, that's essentially, you could almost say it's like a 10% health buff, sort of, although it's only when he rolls. But that's a really solid buff for Daryl. But he's also getting a damage buff as well, a 7, almost an 8% damage buff, a little bit under 8%. So that's a really 2 good buffs for Daryl. He's going to be a really good brawler right now. He was already in my top 10 before, although he was maybe a really underrated brawler that a lot of people didn't know how to use. He's going to probably be in my top 5 now because he's so versatile. He works in almost every single game mode, and these are 2 really solid buffs. He's probably going to be a top 5 brawler. He might not be super overpowered. I don't think he's going to be overpowered, but I do think he's going to be a really good brawler. So I would definitely start recommending you learn how to play Daryl. I got a Daryl guide if you're trying to figure that out. Definitely start practicing your Daryl skills. Another really big change is going to be to Bo. This is a change that we asked from Bo. Bo is a really hard brawler to balance. So his star power is getting a big nerf, which I think was needed. The range on his star power used to give vision in the bushes for up to 6 tiles. Now it's getting a really big nerf to 4 tiles. And this is really significant because a normal person has a range of 2 tiles seeing in the bushes. His star power not only gives an extra 2 tiles on top of that, so it's not quite as strong of a star power now. It might not even be a strong star power now. That is going to have to be seen if his star power is even that strong now at all. So what they're doing to compensate, potentially, is they're giving him a really big damage buff. He's getting over 14% damage buff to his main attack. We're going to see if this is going to make Bo a better brawler or not. I think overall he's going to be more viable, especially, of course, on maps where there's not many bushes. He's definitely going to be a much better option on those places because you're less reliant on his star power, so now he can deal more damage. But we're going to see overall how much this impacts Bo and if he's actually going to be a good brawler or not, or if he's just going to be basically average now. We'll have to see. Now, Barley got some really big changes as well. I think overall it's going to be a big buff for Barley, but we'll see. His star power now goes from healing 200 health every time he attacks to now healing 300 health. So a really big buff to his star power. It's already a pretty good star power before, especially for Barley. Now it's going to be a really strong star power, healing almost 900 health with all 3 attacks. You're going to be healing almost a third of his health, potentially, with just 3 attacks, which is huge for Barley. So really strong star power. He's also getting some damage buffs as well to his normal attack and to his super. His normal attack is increasing a little bit under 7% damage-wise, and his super is getting a huge buff, about a 33% damage increase for every tick. So really big damage buff for Barley, but he's also getting a huge rework to his super. Now when you throw his super at close range, close to Barley, then now the spread of it is much wider. So before with Barley, if you threw it really far, it had a really wide spread, but if you threw it close, it had a really small spread on a super. Now, when you throw his super at close range, the spread of it is much wider. On top of that, you can not only be hit by one tick at a time from Barley's super. So before, you could stack the damage on his super. Say you could throw it all on the safe in Heist and do a ton of damage at once. Now, his super can only deal damage for one of those ticks at a time. So if you're walking through and you're getting hit by multiple ticks on Barley's super, you're only going to be taking damage from one of them at a time. So this is a really big change to Barley. He's no longer going to have that huge potential for damage. Like in Heist, he's no longer going to be able to do nearly as much damage to an enemy safe. So that is a really big nerf for him in Heist, especially as a damage dealer, but he is also getting some really big buffs overall. So I think he's going to be better overall as a brawler. He's not too reliant on dealing damage at close range. Only in Heist is that really a big thing for Barley. And even then, he's still going to be a pretty solid brawler overall. At least his super's going to deal more damage per tick. It might not deal as much damage per thing, but I think Barley's going to be maybe close to being a top 5 brawler, honestly, with these really big changes. He's going to be really strong. A lot of really good stats, really good damage, and he's going to have really good healing. He's going to be really hard to stop, honestly. Now, Frank is getting a big change as well. His star power is getting reworked. Before, when an enemy died, they dropped a blue skull on the map, and Frank could run over that blue skull and gain a 30% damage increase for 10 seconds. Now, there's no more blue, or sorry, no more, I said blue, I meant purple. There's no more purple skulls on the map at all. Now, whenever Frank kills anyone at all, he gets an instant 40% damage increase for 10 seconds. Overall, I kind of think this is going to be a nerf to Frank, because if you're killing someone, who are you using that 10%, who are you using that damage buff on? It's got to be the two other people, but even then, I mean, how often are you going to be engaging multiple people at once? Usually it's going to probably be when you stun multiple people and they're not running away from you because they're stunned. But in that case, you probably don't need a huge damage increase. So I'm not really sure this is going to be a buff for Frank. I kind of think this is going to be a nerf for him. It was kind of better when you could just pick it up later. And because that person who you killed is obviously, it's not going to impact them because they got to respawn and they're going to be invincible and then they got to get back to you. But we'll see how much this impacts Frank. I do think it's probably going to be a small nerf, not a big nerf, probably just a small nerf. I could be wrong though. Similarly, Mortis is also getting a change as well. He's getting a similar rework to Frank with his star power. There's no longer going to be any skulls at all in Brawl Stars when anyone dies. Now, whenever Mortis gets a kill, he instantly gains 1,800 health. So first of all, this is a huge buff to how much health he is gaining. He used to gain 1,000, now he's getting 1,800, so that's a really big increase in the amount of health he's gaining. But there's no longer any skulls he just picks up randomly. It's just now an instant whenever he kills anyone. Also, this is a big difference between Frank and Mortis. Before, it was whenever anyone died, they dropped a skull. Now it's only when they get a kill. So this is a really big change for those brawlers, and it's probably going to happen way less. And this is where I think it's probably a nerf. Although for Mortis, I think it's going to be probably a buff because that's just so much health. And that's a lot of health for someone who tends to take a lot of damage, especially in close range. When he's attacking anyone, he takes a lot of damage. So this is going to be probably a buff for Mortis, but we'll see. He's also getting another really big buff, though. And that's going to be to his normal main attack damage and to his super damage. They're going to increase 12.5% from 800 to 900 at level 1. So this is a really big buff for Mortis. He's going to be dealing a lot more damage. So I definitely think Mortis is going to be a better brawler overall. He's going to be more viable in other game modes. Definitely because of the damage. Also because of star power, maybe. It at least allows him to be more aggressive, and he can get, if he does get that kill, he can be healed instantly and maybe just keep on being aggressive, or just go and find another place to hide up and heal completely. Now we have 6 other balance changes coming, so it's not done yet. There's still plenty to go. We got Neeta, who's getting a buff. Her, I guess it is her. Neeta's star power healing is being increased from 300 to 400, a 33% buff. Solid buff for Neeta. It wasn't that great of a star power. Honestly, I don't feel like you got healing from it that much. So now at least when you do get healing from it, it's more impactful. I still don't think it's that great of a star power, but at least it's a little bit better. Neeta really didn't need a buff, so I find this interesting, but it doesn't hurt. that much at least. Brock, another strong brawler similar to Neeta, is also getting a buff to his star power. Now the damage per second from his star power, whenever he fires a rocket, it leaves fire on the ground that lasts for 3 seconds. And if you walk over it, it deals damage. That damage now being increased by 25% from 240 to 300. So this is a solid buff to Brock. It was honestly a decent star power before, not amazing, not really strong, but it was decent, and it's going to be even better now, obviously. So we're going to see how much of an impact this has to Brock, but he was already a really solid brawler. So he's not going anywhere in the meta, I don't think. He's going to still be a really solid brawler, good in a lot of different game modes, and having that star power now matters a little bit more. El Primo is also getting a star power buff as well. A lot of star power buffs. His damage for his star power is being increased from 600 to 800, a 33% increase to his damage for his star power. Definitely like a decent buff to El Primo. I think it's good that El Primo got some sort of a buff. Not that he was a bad brawler, but he also wasn't a great brawler. So I think this is fine for him. His star power was also not that great either, so it's kind of nice for it to be a little bit more significant. I felt like a lot of the times that damage just didn't matter that much. It does take time for that damage to accumulate too, and a lot of times he just does, like the amount of damage that does is still not that much compared to how much damage his punches do. So it's still an okay star power, but hey, nice to see El Primo get a buff. And Poco is also getting a star power buff. His healing goes from 400 to 500 every time he hits an ally with his attack. So a 25% increase for Poco's star power. Again, not a strong star power. It makes it a little bit better. I don't think it's going to make it an amazing star power. It is going to be definitely better. You can now heal 1500 health for someone, and say if they're holding the gems, which you probably dropped, well, maybe they can stay alive a little bit easier now. So that's kind of nice. It's not the best star power because he has a really slow reload speed, honestly, but it's a buff, so hey, not bad. And the last star power buff is going to Tara. Tara is getting a buff to her pet. Her pet now has better damage and better health. Got twice as much damage per hit for her pet. And when I say this, when you use Tara's super and you have her star power, a little pet, a shadow figure of Tara spawns. That is her pet. And now the damage for that pet increases from 200 to 400. So that's a pretty solid buff. Also, the health of it increases from 2,000 to 2,400. So a 20% increase to Tara's Shadow's health. So this is a solid buff to Tara's Shadow. I mean, honestly, Tara's super is one of the strongest in the game already, if not the strongest. So it's interesting to see it, in a way, get a buff because it only works with her super. So what I can see with this is now you could probably justify nerfing Tara's super, but I mean, they didn't do that. So maybe later, but for now, Tara's super just got even stronger. I don't really know how I feel about that. I kind of think it was really unneeded. I just think they wanted to nerf a bunch of I just think they wanted to buff a bunch of star powers. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute after this next balance change, and the final balance change, which goes to Ricochet, who I do think needed a buff, and he's getting a damage buff, a 7.1% damage buff. Not a big buff. It is definitely a buff though, but it doesn't feel that big, especially when there were so many buffs across the board. I think it sort of takes away the significance of it. I do think Ricochet needed a buff, which is nice. Also, if you made it this far, congrats, because you get this super awesome graphic detailing all the balance changes in one picture that you can either screenshot with the link to it, or if you want to download it, there's a link to it in the description and the pinned comment if you would prefer to do that, or just screenshot, crop it, whatever you want to do. But you look at all these balance changes, and there was only one brawler who got only nerfs. The other brawler who got a nerf was Bo to a star power, and he also got a huge damage buff. You could argue Barley got a nerf to his super, but he also got a buff in other ways as well. You could argue Frank got a nerf, maybe small one. That one's to be seen. Mortis buff and a reword. Overall, a lot of buffs, maybe 10 buffs, 11 buffs, something like that. So overall, across the board, interesting way to change the meta. We're really just seeing a ton of star power buffs, so it really seems like Supercell wants to make star powers a lot more important, which I'm guessing is because, actually I'm not quite sure why, but one potential guess is maybe the revenue isn't quite what they want, so they want to make maxing your account that much more worth it, because honestly, the power scale in Brawl Stars is pretty friendly for free-to-play players, because you can get a brawler to level 7 really easily, only 33% of the cost, and you can get 70% of the damage. So that's pretty solid for not much cost, a lot of damage. So trying to make star powers more worth it, I guess. Actually, I said 70%. It's even more than that. I'm sorry. 7 out of 9. And just to give even a little more backstory to why I think maybe they're trying to increase the revenue model, if you look at how much money Brawl Stars made in the first month of its release compared to Clash Royale's, and they actually made twice as less. Clash Royale made $135 million in its first month. Brawl Stars made $65 million about, and I can give a link to that in the description if you guys want to see that. So that is definitely interesting to see. I do also want to say though, it's not entirely fair to compare because Clash Royale is a game that came from a pre-existing universe that was already really successful and a really huge revenue model as well from Clash of Clans. So not an entirely fair comparison to a brand new universe and a brand new game coming out. But just to point out that maybe the revenue isn't quite what they want, so making star powers more worth it could be a way to slightly increase your revenue and make maxing out more worth it. I do think as a revenue model that probably makes sense. Now, as far as what the new top 5 is going to look like, honestly, here's going to be my guess. The best brawler in the game is going to be Spike, and I think that is going to be unquestionable. Spike got no changes. I don't really see any of these buffs being a huge nerf to Spike in any way. Spike is a really versatile brawler, good versus almost everything. He's not overpowered, but he's going to be the best brawler because he's good in every single game mode in a lot of different ways, and he's so versatile. I think the second best brawler is going to be Pam. Pam didn't get any nerfs, didn't get any buffs either, but Pam is just so strong. She's also really versatile just because of how much damage she can do, and healing is good in everything. So that is a really solid move. I think Leon might be the third best brawler after that. And then I think we're going to have Daryl in there, maybe Neeta, and maybe Barley. I'm not quite sure. One of those is obviously going to have to be kicked out of the top 5. Could be Daryl, but I think it probably is something like that with Barley, Neeta, and Daryl somewhere around the top 5. I'm not quite sure who else is going to be in there. I don't think Bo is going to be in the top 10. I don't think Mortis is going to be in the top 10. I don't think either of those brawlers are going to be good enough for that. They're probably going to be somewhere just outside of it, is my guess. You also could see Brock and Tara somewhere close to the top 5. Maybe not quite there, but definitely really close. Let me know what you think of the balance changes down below. I'd love to hear your opinion. That's going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you later.